that ANC, the ANC that fought the good fight, that truly wanted to liberate black people of this country and bring true freedom and prosperity to black people, died in 1991, in my view. The ANC leadership was an agent of the people. They should have exercised that agency properly. So if people say we want X, Y, and Z, you get to the negotiating table and the people on the other side say, no, we're not willing to give you X, Y, and Z. We can give you A, B, and C. What you should then do is go back to the people and say, hey, but you're not going to get X, Y, and Z. You're going to get A, B, and C. And let the people decide whether they want to accept A, B, and C. You don't shove it down their throats. Africa is basically a source of cheap raw materials. It is a source of cheap labor, and it is a market for their manufactured goods. That's it. Nothing else.
In a world where Africans have lost their roots, it has become of vital importance to document our ways. In an effort to reverse the brainwashing of the past, where we were made to believe our ways are demonic, we are pressed to create dignified and respectful platforms to unpack our spiritual ways. The views and opinions expressed in this episode are those of the guest and do not necessarily reflect the beliefs or position of this channel, its hosts, or affiliates. This podcast is a platform for open discussions and exploration of various perspectives, including controversial and unconventional ideas. We encourage viewers to think critically, do their own research, and form their own opinions. The content is for informational and entertainment purposes only and should not be taken as fact, advice, or an endorsement of any specific viewpoint. Viewers' discretion is advised. Umoya ulight, umoya ubright. Welcome to another episode of MOYA Political Series, where we bring you guests who are going to give you the education that you're not going to get at the Mlungu schools. Thank you so much for everybody who has joined the community. The numbers are growing so quickly. It's so exciting. Thank you for watching the adverts till the end, guys. I heard that there are some DA ads there, guys. Yaya's Pof, I don't have to say much, but ninga skip a leyo ad. Otherwise, Mr. Luthuli, another rebel. Meet another rebel. Mthunzi Luthuli, thank you so much for agreeing to come to MOYA to come and also spodlela kancane.
Yeah, no, thanks. Say I think spodle from time to time, yeah.
Especially in this country that we live in. It's very simple. My job is very simple. I just listen. So you can just offload what's on your chest. I mean, you come from an ANC family. Let's start there. What it was, what it is, what it's becoming. So let's unpack where we are.
Okay. I do come from a family that, was instrumental in the formation of the ANC and later, in the presidency of the ANC through my grandfather.
Feel free to unpack it for especially the young audience who may not know the Luthuli surname. And so you've got bragging rights,
So you're right. A lot of people, they know that the ANC headquarters are called Luthuli House, but they don't know where this Luthuli House comes from. So the headquarters of the ANC are named after Chief Albert Luthuli, who is my grandfather. Chief Albert Luthuli took the presidents of the ANC. At the time, the presidents of the ANC were called President General. So he was President General of the ANC from 1952 to 1967 when he died. Okay. The Nationalist Party had come into power in 1948. So when Chief Luthuli takes over in 1952, the apartheid machinery is now, gaining momentum and going into, top gear, so to speak. So it was a very difficult time to become President General of the ANC. And then when he gets there, and I'm just going to talk, we're not going to talk about the whole history, but just to highlight the impact that he made and why perhaps the ANC decided to name its headquarters after him. So when he took over the presidency of the ANC, yes, it had made, some impact on the political scene up to then, but it wasn't really major, if you know what I mean. It was the ANC at the time was not a mass movement. It was a party of people, educated individuals, yes, spread across the country, but they would engage in intellectual discussions. They would write letters to London and maybe to the government here, debate things, but it wasn't a truly mass-based movement. Yeah, led by the, it seems a little bit offensive to call them bourgeois because they didn't really see themselves as bourgeois. They were intellectuals whose heart was in the right place. But I think just in terms of the organization of the party and where its power should be, but the source of its power where it should be, I think that wasn't quite in place. So when Chief Luthuli came, he decided, look, the ANC, if it's going to succeed, it has to be a mass-based movement. And it has to also create a network of people and other organizations that it works with in order to be far more effective. So that's when the ANC then becomes really a mass-based movement. That's when you start getting the defiance campaigns. You see, so that was his major contribution to, and that's when he starts forming relationships with the South African Communist Party, the labor movements. The tripartite alliance originates all the way from there. Yeah. So that's what his vision for the success of the ANC. That's one major contribution that he made. The 1956 Women's March to Pretoria happens under his presidency. Yeah, he was, in terms of thinking, he was way ahead of his time. The empowerment of women within, not just the ANC, but generally in social discourse, he was very much in favor of that. He was the first chief to involve women in his tribal council. And and when he did that, there were rumblings and, he even had to answer to the Zulu king as to why he was doing this. And Chief Luthuli was very clear. Look, half of the people in society are women. We are brought up by women, even us as men. Women understand a lot of things that we don't really understand. They make a lot of contribution to society. So he doesn't see why women should not be part of his tribal council, And he continued despite the resistance from other sectors of society. So, so he was very visionary and very forward-thinking. So he turned the ANC into a really mass movement, and very open to the involvement of women and other sectors of society that perhaps some people thought he shouldn't be engaging with. So, for instance, if he was accused of working with the communists, and there was this thing, because he was also a very deeply spiritual and Christian man. He was as a lay preacher in church and all of that. So people accused him, and they said, there's a contradiction here. How can you claim to be such a devout Christian, but you want to work with communists? But he was also very clear. Look, firstly, communism is not it's not an ideology that talks about spirituality or religion. It's largely an economic and social concept. The second thing is that, we can differ on a number of things, but insofar as we want to dismantle apartheid, there we have a common objective. And if for nothing else, at least on that point, we can collaborate. And that was his focus. So there's a huge contribution that he made. The Freedom Charter gets, conceptualized, developed, and everything during his time. And then people like to, People like to criticize the Freedom Charter these days. Yes. But actually, there had been nothing similar before then. And I don't know if you know how the Freedom Charter came about. So Chief Luthuli and the two people who were the key architects to the Freedom Charter is Chief Luthuli and Z.K. Matthews. Z.K. Matthews is Naledi Pando's grandfather. Yeah. So Chief Luthuli had gone to the United States on church-related matters, but obviously because they knew that he was a leader of the ANC in the country as well, so he would obviously get interviewed and questioned about, the political struggles of the black people of black people in South Africa. And one of the questions that kept coming up was, okay, well, we understand that the apartheid system is an evil system, and we know what you don't want. You have articulated that very well. But what is it that you do want? Is there maybe a Bill of Rights or something like that we can look at and say that states specifically that this is what you want? And there wasn't anything, you see. So when they came back, they discussed the issue and they said, yeah, these people do have a point. It's not enough just to say what you don't want. You also need to say what you do want, So then they conceptualized the whole thing about the Freedom Charter. And the Freedom Charter was, to put it together, was a major, major exercise. Some people say it was written by some white guy,
Can I ask a question before you go? Mm-hmm. Z.K. Matthews, what was their context? What brought them together? Was it just because they were comrades, or did they grow up together, or?
Okay, how they met at Adams College, south of Durban. Okay. So my grandfather studied at Adams College, and then he also lectured there. Okay. And Z.K. Matthews was also a lecturer at Adams College. Yeah. And then they also belong to the same church. Yeah, so that's how they got to know each other then, even before they got,
Got you.
yeah, into politics. So they were already in politics a little bit at the time, but before they really got into the ANC and to the higher ranks of the ANC. That's how they came together.
Okay.
Yeah. So then they embarked on the project of developing the Freedom Charter. It was a major exercise.
And it's not called that at the time, I'm sure, ne?
Yeah, at the time it wasn't
this document that they're working on.
They're working on, but it wasn't really. I think the name really only came up towards the end. It was too. They had different names for it, and people.
So these two ANC comrades are now just working on this document.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. So, but if you think about the exercise that went into developing the Freedom Charter, they went to all the farms. They went to all the factories. They went to all the churches, all the townships, everywhere, to ask people. So there were volunteers. They got volunteers who would go and they would hold meetings with the people, and they would document what people wanted,
Like the MOYA process.
Yeah. So they would document. I don't know if the MOYA process is exactly like that. I don't know.
Okay.
But that's what the Freedom Charter, there was the Freedom Charter process. And they did that right across the country, And then at the end, they then had to send, so all the volunteers had to capture all of that information, and it was all then put together and synthesized and said, okay, there are these themes. People want political rights. People want decent housing. People want to own the economy.
Was a national dialogue.
Yes, the proper national dialogue. That's what it was. And you see, and this is where I have a problem, but we'll get to.
Of course we will. Of
course
we will.
Yeah, you see, there was no government involved there. You see,
exactly.
Yeah. So then the Freedom Charter was then drafted, circulated, and then eventually adopted here in Cape Town. So that's a second big contribution that he made to South Africa and to the ANC. The third one is that when he received the Nobel Peace Prize in he was awarded it in 1960, but he only received it, went to Norway, Oslo, to receive it in 1961 because the nationalist government wouldn't allow him to travel there. You see, but there was so much pressure piling on the government, both internally and externally, that eventually they had to capitulate, so to speak, and just allow him to travel.
What made him get the Nobel Peace Prize? What made his work stand out?
Yeah, so if you look at the proposals, because what happens is people have to propose names to the Nobel Committee, as to who should be awarded the Nobel Prize. His name was proposed by two professors. One was in England. I can't remember the other one. I think he might also have been in England or the US. and then they gave their reasons. Their reasons were that Chief Luthuli has transformed the ANC into a mass movement, but a very effective mass movement, but also very disciplined and non-violent. Okay, and this is a very, and they're fighting a good cause, you know, and it was quite unique, both on the continent and perhaps in other parts of the world. So if you look at many other parts of the world, when movements like that start, they eventually just degenerate into violence and all of that. But he had managed to maintain a very disciplined approach to, how they wage the struggles against apartheid, just defiance campaigns, breaking of the past laws and all of those sorts of things. But he was also trying to make sure, and by the way, Chief Luthuli was, some people said, no, but why should we must just be violent? And he understood where people came from. But, the apartheid state at the time was the most powerful militarily, was the most powerful state in the, and he didn't want people to be just slaughtered anyhow, So he had to find the middle ground in terms of which they could be effective as a movement, but still safeguard people's lives, So it was a very, they proposed his name for that, for waging a very effective, peaceful but militant struggle, if you know what I mean. Not violent. You can be militant without killing, without being violent. So the people who proposed his name felt that that was quite unique, and it was quite an effective, I think it was exposing the apartheid regime and exposing even some of the things that the outside world didn't know about. So what the Nobel Peace Prize did is that it changed the nature and character of the South African struggle. Suddenly, it stopped just being an internal issue only to South Africans, and maybe a few African countries. Suddenly, it became an international thing. You see? And that changed everything, particularly for the apartheid government, you see. So, and that helped the ANC enormously, you see. So that was this other big contribution. And without that, I doubt that the ANC would have made the strides that it did. So I think taking all of those things into consideration, and even when the ANC came back, even up to now, the way that the ANC is structured, in terms of having a national structure, then the provinces, then the regions, and the branch system, all of that was institutionalized within the ANC by Chief Luthuli. You see, so he was a major contributor. Yeah. So, and I think that's why they named their headquarters Chief Luthuli House. Yeah. Yeah. So that's my background. But even before Chief Luthuli, Chief Luthuli's uncle, ubaba omncane wakhe, igama lakhe kwaku Martin Luthuli. Yeah. So when Ubaba Kamkulu died, they were taken care of yena no Koko Umawak and his siblings. They were under Umkhulu Martin. And Umkhulu Martin had been involved in the Natal, what was then called Natal, structures that led to the formation of the ANC in 1912. So he was shaped by, and Umkhulu Martin did a lot. His political ideologies were very, very progressive for the time. It's just that maybe the times during which he lived were so oppressive that he couldn't make an impact. And it was only everything else that was in his mind came through Chief Luthuli much later, like 50 years later, But yeah, so that's roughly, let me say, the recent history of the Luthulis. But we trace our ancestry all the way back to Inkosi usenza ngakhona, King Shaka's father. I don't know if you know, Ulona, Unandi, one of King Senza Ngakhona's wives, and Queen Nandi is Shaka's mother. She was persecuted within the royal house.
Yes.
Yeah, and eventually, at night, one time, she decided to elope, and she left. To cut a long story short, they stayed with a few other tribes in the area, the Mthunzi, the Ndwandwes, and all of that. Shaka then became very powerful, even within the armies of those tribes. At the time, the Zulu tribe was not a big one, and in fact, it was smaller than some of the other ones, arguably. What then happened is that Umkabayi Jama, who was King Senza Ngakhona's sister and an aunt to Shaka. By the way, she was a very powerful woman.
Yes.
Politically, very influential. Yeah. So she realized, hey, this is a problem now. Because they ill-treated Unandi, Nushaka, and they're obviously bitter. For Ushaka to head up the armies of the neighboring tribes was a big danger. He could come and, revenge, basically. So Umkabayi then said, look, we need to bring Shaka back. And in any case, if we bring him back, because he's such a brave warrior and a leader, he can actually grow our, which is very clever of Umkabayi. You can see what a political strategist she was, So then they had to get someone who was going to lead a team to go and negotiate with Shaka to come back. Shaka and his mother to come back. You can imagine this was a difficult mission. Yeah. So the leader of that team had to be a good negotiator. And someone who could be trusted by both sides. But number two, he also had to be someone who understood war and could lead a military regiment. Because if they got there And the other side decided, no, we're not negotiating, we're killing you.
In fact,
They had to be able to defend themselves. So it was a tough mission. The person who was put in charge of that mission was Matthews and Luthuli. Yeah. So he was one of King Senza Ngakona's trusted generals. Yeah. So we trace our history all the way back then. So Itagazolo Zasekaya, for instance, is Matlanduna. Yeah, they date all the way back to there. Yeah.
So beautiful, you know?
Yeah.
And this is the stuff that our youth doesn't know these stories so intimately.
Yeah, yeah, no.
And this is what we're trying to fill in the gap. Okay, so now this is the character of what ANC used to be. Now let's talk about how your feelings as a
about the ANC now.
Yeah. As a contributor.
Yeah. So my view is the following. That ANC, the ANC that fought the good fight, you know, that truly wanted to liberate black people of this country and bring true freedom and prosperity to black people, died in 1991, in my view. Yes. At the Durban-Westville conference, ANC conference, which was the first conference in the country after the unbanning. In that conference, Nelson Mandela, so Oliver Tambo stepped down, who I have immense respect for. I think he was and by the way, Chief Luthuli was also very fond of Oliver Tambo. And he felt that he was a stronger and more genuine person than Mandela, for instance. You know, and yeah. So, and I think that's why after he died, Oliver Tambo automatically took over as ANC president. Yeah. So I think that the true ANC died when Oliver Tambo, and yes, he was already old and frail, stepped down at the Durban conference, Durban-Westville conference. Mandela took over as president. Thabo Mbeki became deputy president. Cyril Ramaphosa was the secretary general, etc. That was the beginning of the fake ANC. Let's just be honest. People did not realize it at the time. And I must say, I also didn't realize it at the time. The only time when I started having suspicions about the fact that, no, this is not the real ANC, was in 1992. In 1992, that newly elected ANC leadership released a document entitled Ready to Govern. When you get a chance, you should download the document and read it if you haven't read it. But yeah, but that document was a major departure from the previous policies of the ANC. Major departure. There was no nationalization anymore. You know, major departure. And basically, you could see that they were adopting the policies of white business.
Stellenbosch.
Yeah, either fully or partly, and then trying to justify them in this document. You see, that's when some of us, you know, started being suspicious. But the ANC continued with the revolutionary rhetoric. Okay. But it was only rhetoric. That's the point, you see. I think now to most people, they realize that in fact, the ANC just capitulated in the discussions with the whites, and in their desperation to be in office, they sold out. Now, when you talk to the older people in the ANC, they say, no, we didn't sell out. We had to, compromise because it was a negotiated settlement. Remember, we didn't win the war and all of these sorts of things. I always say to them, look, if you get a mandate from people saying, look, we want our land back, we want to own the economy, and it's very clear what they want, and they say, this is what you should go and negotiate for us. So you tell, so I'm representing you. I'm your agent. I'm not negotiating my own thing. I'm your agent. So the ANC leadership was an agent of the people. They should have exercised that agency properly. So if people say we want X, Y, and Z, you get to the negotiating table and the people on the other side say, no, we're not willing to give you X, Y, and Z. We can give you A, B, and C. What you should then do is go back to the people and say, hey, but you're not going to get X, Y, and Z. You're going to get A, B, and C. And let the people decide whether they want to accept A, B, and C. You don't shove it down their throats. Uvume wena ngalana, and then you shove it down their throats and you sort of cover up the whole thing. My view is that the South African settlement, a so-called peaceful transition, that culminated in the adoption of the Constitution in 1996. In my view, it is one of the biggest sellouts, if not the biggest sellout in political history, given what was at stake. In my view, that's what it is. The biggest sellout in political history. But it was intelligently covered up. They said, okay, we will raise the stature and popularity of Mandela to, almost to Messiah level, and get everybody to rally behind this man, They had, about Bishop Tutu talking about a non-existent rainbow nation and all of these sorts of things. They created this euphoria, through the media and other means. So it was a intelligently crafted strategy to cover up the betrayal. But the betrayal, in my view, is one of the biggest betrayals in the history of politics. There's no doubt about that. What did we get from the settlement as black people? Absolutely nothing. We got maybe beautiful Madiba dance and songs and some slogans, but is that what we fought for? It's not. And then also fictitious things like, democracy. And from time to time we are asked to celebrate 10 years or 20 years or 30 years of democracy.
Stronger together.
Yeah, but what about material things that we have always wanted and things that were taken away from us? And the very same ANC is the one that would push that we must celebrate. There'll be a whole campaign about celebrating 20 years of democracy. We want to celebrate getting our land back. That's what we want to celebrate. Stop telling us about democracy all the time. And besides, also, we don't even have that democracy, by the way. This freedom and democracy, it's not there. I often say to people who try and argue with me, you know, and they say, no, we've got democracy in this country, and they talk about elections. I say elections does not equal democracy. That's the first thing that you need to understand. And then I say to them, but look at the ANC conference resolutions, okay, from 1996, okay? If you look at the conference resolutions from 1996 all the way up to the recent one, okay? Those resolutions are good resolutions. They come from the people on the ground, okay? Saying this is what we want, this is what we want. So those resolutions have things like, you know, we must process and beneficiate our minerals here in the country instead of exporting raw materials. 30 years later, that hasn't happened. You tell me why, okay? If there was democracy and people say this is what we want, then those things should have been implemented. They haven't been implemented.
Yep.
There is no democracy, you see? And there's a whole host of other things, you know. People want, they've demanded the state bank, they've, all sorts of things, you know. None of those things have happened. You know why? Because there is subversion of democracy. So that process might be democratic, leading up to, you know, the formulation of the resolutions, of people's resolutions about what they want. But what then happened is that the elected leadership that comes out of those national conferences then simply gets bought by whites. That's what happened. They get bought by whites. They're told, look, you know, you're not going to implement these things. They go and they have expensive wines, wherever they have their expensive wines. They get given money. And then they toe the line of their white handlers, you know, and they don't implement these things. There's absolutely no reason why an ANC government... Let's take, for instance, just the issue of minerals beneficiation, okay? We've got lots of minerals that the world needs, you know? Many of them are regarded as scarce minerals and rare earth minerals, essential for many of the new technologies, okay? Many of them are required for, you know, renewable energy technologies, you know, satellite systems, cell phones, and all of these sorts of things. So why is it that we export raw materials? Just stuff from the ground and we just ship it out. And then they refine it overseas and make high-value products. Now, it doesn't take a genius to understand that if we beneficiated those minerals here, first you would have to build huge industries and factories to beneficiate them. So what happens then?
Jobs.
Jobs. Eh? You deal with this unemployment problem. That's the first thing. Secondly, you upskill the country, because in order for you to be able to process you will need chemical engineers, extractive metallurgists, geophysicists, and all kinds of you know, high-tech people. So the general skills levels of the country rises, okay? Second major a benefit to doing this. Number 3, you export higher value goods, okay? Closer to the finished material if it's not the finished material, okay? What does that mean? It means that you earn more money, okay, for the country, which means the country becomes richer, you improve your balance of payments, and all these sorts of things, okay? The rand gets stronger, you improve the exchange rates, etc., etc. So there is every reason why any government should want to do this, but they don't do it. Why? Why? You see, because they're told by white people not to do it. You see, if we do it, then 2 things happen. You destroy jobs in the places where these minerals are
going to.
Yeah. Whatever, Europe, US, wherever. That's the first thing. And then the second thing, they will have to pay us more money to get the products that they want. And they don't want to do that.
They become the consumers.
They become the consumers. They become the buyer. You see, and they don't want that.
They need us to be the consumers.
Exactly. I spent some time, I graduated here with an engineering degree and I worked and then after a while I got an opportunity to go and study an MBA at the Manchester Business School in the UK. And then I worked in London for a while before coming back. One of the things that I understood when I was in the UK, is that the West and white people in general have absolutely no interest in Africa and Africans. Even when you do case studies at the business school, Africa doesn't feature at all. There'll be case studies about, how these companies succeeded here. The case studies are mainly European and American, and there will be a few from the East, nothing from Africa. The only time that, Africa gets mentioned in these business schools is when you start talking about welfare economics. Yes. To them, Africa is just, it's good for nothing, except 3 things. And that's what I understood when I was there. To Europeans, or to the West, basically, Africa is basically a source of cheap raw materials. It is a source of cheap labor, and it is a market for their manufactured goods. That's it. Nothing else. And you see it in even, when you look at the economic behavior of our countries and our people and our politicians. Okay, what do? We export raw materials. Just what I was talking about now. Why we don't process ours? Because the West, and local whites and overseas, they buy our politicians. A case in point is Ramaphosa. We all know it. So that they serve their interests and not the interest of the people.
Are you not scared of getting sued when you say things like that?
No, I don't. They're in public office. If they think we are wrong, they must they must explain to the public why they're not. No, I'm not scared. I don't care. The truth at some point must be spoken. It must be told. The truth must be told. For far too long, we have been quiet and people have been fooled, and those who have, access to the public platforms, they have spread the propaganda. No. It can't continue like that. And it's one of the things that is stopping real change in South Africa.
Yeah.
Yeah. The truth is never told, and people are...
Because we get punished when we tell the truth in this
Yes, we
country.
get punished. I am punished, in many ways. But so that is the problem. That's what. So what I was saying is, you even see these three things. What I said, Europe, Africa to them is only good for three things: source of raw materials, source of cheap labor, and a market for their manufactured goods. That's it. You see it. We don't beneficiate and industrialize our countries. We export raw stuff, and that's it. Number two, we build malls, especially in South Africa. So that we can consume.
Take the money out. Take the money out.
Yeah, goods manufactured by the West with money we don't have. It is so stupid. I'm sorry to say this. Yeah, but our leaders are perpetuating this. The West keeps getting what it wants from Africa and nothing else. And who gives it to them? Our leaders.
But Mthunzi, so what are we going to do about the fact that Abelungu, Imali is their culture? And that's not our culture.
Yeah.
We put people ahead of Imali.
Yeah.
Yeah. And now the problem is that you're dealing with the people that won't do just anything for money. But the whites will do just anything for money.
Yeah. It's a difficult one because it's like fighting a war in a territory that you don't understand. It's not yours, It's like if we were it's like we were to go to the North Pole and try and wage a war there, you would be hopeless. So it's a difficult one. We have to do something about that. My view is that we can still fight, let's call it the money wars, without our character changing and us turning into money mongerers or something like that, if you know what I mean. Yeah.
People who worship money.
Yeah, people who worship.
We don't want that.
Yeah, we don't want that.
An African.
And it's very sad when I see it today. Yeah. That people will do anything for money. So, but you raise an interesting topic. So let's go back to how we used to live as people. Okay. We didn't use money. There was no money circulating in our societies,
But we had wealth.
Well, great. There was one anthropologist who was sent from the UK. I can't remember his name now. He's Sir something. He was sent to the UK. They used to send people to Africa and Asia, anthropologists to study, the peoples of the continent, and they send some to South America as well, Latin America, and study them, okay? Partly it was an intellectual pursuit, but the other one was a colonization mission, yeah. This chap, why do I forget his name now? When he went back to report to the British Parliament about what he had observed about...
Yes, I know what you're talking about.
Yeah, the people of Southern Africa. He said, I must confess, I have never seen a people so advanced in terms of just living life, He says, I did not see one criminal in those societies. I did not not see one prostitute. There no drug dealers. There are no destitute children. There is no poverty. Nothing. And he said, clearly, they have thought their systems out very, very carefully. And if we want to go there, we would have to break those systems.
Their culture.
Yeah, their culture. And everything that goes with it. And we managed to do all of that without using money. You see? So that's our background. Already Europeans money was a big thing to them, you know. And then they come, they colonize us, and all of that. And not because of anything, just because their military technology was more advanced. Nothing else, you know. And there were instances, in fact, where we even defeated them with that advanced technology, Imbiase Sandlwana, for instance, and other things. But ultimately, they were bound to win because they had advanced weapons.
Yes.
Okay. But you see, the other thing for me that they did was to use the Bible against us. Okay. So now we've been defeated. The Bible was a major thing in changing our cultural outlook on life. Major instrument. People don't realize it. And you see, the importance of culture, people don't know. Culture is the glue that holds society together. You see. And once you melt that glue or take it away, everything breaks apart. Which is why we're where we are today. You see. So what they then did, just to go back to the issue of money, there's a lot I can say about that aspect of things. The Bible then comes and tells us, amongst other things, that, we should not aspire to be rich, because it's easier for an elephant to go through the eye of the needle than for a rich man to enter the kingdom of God. Hey? Imagine how difficult that is. I mean, if it's easier, if it's easier for an elephant to go through the eye of a needle than for a... But what happens in reality? The very same people who tell you that they wake up every day and fight to get more money. Why? Don't they want to go to heaven? I mean, they even kill to get the money. So, I've always seen these contradictions, in the religions that were brought here, and us dumping our own religions and cultural practices, that, this is not very intelligent. It's not. And I think this is maybe partly what affects us and our progress as black people. You look at the Jews. The Jews stuck to their religion. And Jews are well-to-do financially all around the world.
Yep.
You look at the Arabs. The Arabs, they kept the Islamic religion, and they've got oil. They're well-to-do. And I can go on and on. As Africans, we dumped our religions, we dumped our culture, And look where we
Bega
are.
Sinjani.
Buka sinjani. And prior to that, we were very successful. Like that British anthropologist said, we're one of the best societies in terms of just how harmonious we lived. You know, I make many examples. I often say to people, for instance, in my language, I think nang as Xhosa, you don't have it. We don't have a name for a jail. E-jail. E-jail is jail. There's no.
We didn't have systems like that.
We didn't have jails. Why? Because society had been so well studied by our people, and it had been so well structured that it produced very few criminals. You know, people who were misfits to such an extent that they had to be removed from society. There were very few. You know, those people in my culture became what we call imkovu. You know, umkovu were those people who became misfits, but there were very few of them, and society rejected them, so they would go to the mountains and live in the mountains and the forests. You know, and you know, when you stop living with people, it shows. You stop becoming fully human. You know, your language starts degenerating. You grow hair, and you start doing funny things, having, you know, practices that are just not animalistic. Yeah. So that's why they were called Mkovu. Mkovu is a human being that has
a zombie.
Yeah, that has these animalistic looks and practices. So, abantu, when they saw Mkovu, they would kill Mkovu. Yeah. So Mkovu lived in caves, you know, in the mountains and forests, in caves. And Mkovu yaingaphumi from the caves. I mean, Mkovu would only go out to forage for food and all of that when it gets dark. Yabo? When the sun sets, that's when Mkovu comes, because then people are now going to their homes now. So the chances of coming across people is low. So the chances of dying are low. Yeah. So that's why, for instance, ngesizulu we have a saying, a city. You know, when it's hot, when it's really, really hot, we say, namhlanje lishisa likhipha umkhovu ejeni. Likhipha umkhovu ejeni. It means ukuthi, angithi when it gets hot, the caves also get hot. Yabo. But imkhovu wouldn't come out of Ilona caves, because it was like a death sentence. You come across abantu and then they would kill you. So Mkovu, you stay in your cave, no matter how hot it is. But if it's so hot, if it's very hot, it's so hot that Mkovu is willing to take that risk of being killed, it means it's really, really hot. So you know, sometimes, for instance, again, now we come to language.
Yes.
Okay? It's all part of culture. And, yeah. So sometimes, like these days, you know, people will say, or maybe they will know the expression, but when I ask them, okay, you know, very few people actually know. But when you start telling them, then they say, oh, is that so? Yeah. You see? Now, you see how culture and language and history are intimately intertwined. So, uma sikhula noma sikhulisa izingane zethu zingasifundi isiXhosa, zingasifundi isiSuthu, isiTswana, isiZulu kanjalo, you lose your culture, you lose your history,
you lose yourself.
You lose yourself. We're not saying that people shouldn't speak English. I speak English, but speaking English shouldn't mean that you shouldn't also...
Don't lose yourself.
Yeah, you must not lose yourself. Yeah, I'm fluent in English, but you know, your way of thinking, your outlook on life must be African. And this causes lots of problems. Let me give you just one. And this is my personal belief. I haven't collected empirical evidence on it. But you know, many of our languages had expressions that fortified the mind. You know? So, and I know lots of expressions, similar expressions in Xhosa. But for instance, as Zulu ninja, you have expressions like akunandlovu yasindo umbogo wayo. Okay? You know, there's no elephant who you know that ever failed to carry its trunk. Okay? It means good. You know, even if you think you have, you know, big problems, you can actually deal with them successfully. Okay, you know, when you grow up in an environment that has those kinds of expressions, it strengthens your mind, it strengthens your resolve, you become a stronger person generally. Okay, there aren't such expressions esingisi. You see. So, a child that grows up in an environment, la ukhulunywa khona kanjalo, you know, kukhulunywa isintu with those kinds of expressions. Kube lengane ekhula ikhuluma isingisi without those, this child will be stronger.
But you can even see, look at the rural child compared to the urban child.
Yeah, you see.
Yeah.
That's partly the reason.
Yeah.
You know, and then there are a whole host of other things. You look at the rural child, mabe eskoleni, they walk. Tina, we used to walk mas eskoleni plus minus 5 kilometers to school and 5 kilometers back. Ndamba. You know, and it was nothing. we're just going to school and coming back. Tell me an urban child that would be willing to...
child abuse. Child abuse
and all sorts of things. So, those kinds of things, they strengthen you. But we're talking about, you know, culture and language. Yeah. And my view is that that's why these days you're starting to see an increase in black suicides.
Yeah.
I mean, when suicide amongst black people was unheard of. Yeah, you see. And it's partly because of these kinds of things that I'm talking about. Again, we don't have a word for suicide in our language because it ingekho.
It came when the standard became white.
Yeah. You see, so into engizamugisho ukuthi one of the things that we have to do when we craft our future, we have to think about the restoration of our cultures and languages and all the cultural practices, the religions, and all of that. Because I think without that, you know, we will have a problem.
Ever.
Yeah.
That's why bezibulala, because I saw Zebafike to that standard.
Yeah. So, and I always say to people, look at the nations that succeed. the Chinese, the Japanese, the Koreans, and, you know, they don't try to be whites. You know, they will. Technology doesn't mean you have to be white. You know, the fact that I use a fridge or I drive a nice car should not mean ukuthi manje mina ubuntu bami ngaphakathi kufanele kube umlungu. So we'll, in my view, we'll really have to look at that. It's an important part of society, culture, and everything that's related to culture.
So even this thing, I mean, so South Africa is a multicultural space, right?
Yeah.
And we got to this conversation because we're talking about how we view things completely different, Tabelung, when we look at money. Another thing we view differently is the concept of land.
Yeah.
We don't own land. And white people own land. So how are we going to now have this conversation when these two races have got completely different concepts? For us, it's a spiritual thing, but it's a material thing that they need to own and draw borders on.
Yeah. So, again, I think this is where our leaders sold out. We are the majority in this country. We were here first, so we should assert our concepts and practices and everything related to land. Abelungu abafikanga nomhlaba la. Dromedaries didn't come with land. No. Basithola la nomhlaba wethu. And we are the majority. So uma ngabe sithi kufanele umhlaba usetshenziswe ngendlela ethize, then awusetshenziswe ngaleyo ndlela. They only make up less than 10% of the population. I mean, why should we even listen? Yeah, why should we even listen to them? And you know, and then they tell these politicians, oh yeah, no property rights. This, if there are no property rights, the world will reject you. No investors will come. Nonsense. Firstly, the fact that you don't own the land doesn't mean that you have no rights over the land. Rights don't necessarily come with ownership. Okay? So, back in the days, Tina, let's say you're a young man, you know, you go to, you become a warrior, a soldier, you know, then you come back, then it's time to settle down. Inkosi, yeah, we use the term uqoshisa. Inkosi ayikuqoshisa ngomhlaba. Okay? You are given a piece of land where you would establish your homestead, have your farms and everything. Umhlaba is for you to use for the benefit of your family and those around you. Okay? Full benefit. Almost as if you owned it, but you don't. It's owned by the people. It's owned by... And you see, abanye, they even the... Umhlaba uonishwa abantu abakhona nabantu asengabengasekho. Inkosi is merely a custodian and a manager of, you know, to make sure that everybody gets their fair share and there's fairness and justice in the distribution and management of umhlaba. It's not my thing. Yeah. You know. So the whole concept around lands, and by the way, we are not, you know, when we say no, land must be put in the hands of the state, or if it's not the state, it's the you know, go back to the cultural systems and practices that we had. It's not a crazy thing. Did you know that in Singapore, okay, which is regarded as one of the most successful states in Southeast Asia. And few people talk about this. You know, white people in this country they always parrot the story that yeah, you know, successful countries are where there's individual property rights and they're protected by the constitution and all of these sorts of things, and that's the only way that you can progress, because if you don't have that, if property rights cannot be guaranteed, then investors won't come and all of this nonsense. Do you know that in Singapore, for instance, 78% of the land is owned by the state? Yeah. It's owned by the, but they won't tell you that, because then you'll get an idea, you see, and have an argument against owned by the state. This thing of everything must be privatized is nonsense.
It's greed.
Yeah. Sometimes when I talk about this, I feel like using stronger language, but I won't, because, you know.
Yeah, the children.
Yeah. But it's nonsense. You look at some of the best airlines in the world. Singapore Airlines is one of them, state-owned. Okay? The best ports authority in the world runs the Singapore Container Terminal. It's the busiest, the most advanced container terminal in the world. Controls trade in that part of the world. And it's mainly a transshipment hub of the East, you know, state-owned. This idea that for there to be excellence, something must be privately owned is nonsense. It's nonsense. But I'll tell you, it's not as if there is no problem with state ownership. There is, but it's a simple thing. We just need to go deeper and understand things. You see, when you own your business, you own MOYA land. You know that if you don't work, if you don't wake up and, you know, do whatever you have to do, you feel it. The money won't come in, your business will decline. There is a direct impact on you as the owner of the business. But if I run a state-owned institution, if something goes wrong, is there a direct impact on me? No. I don't own it as an individual. Even if I'm the CEO, I don't own it. Often I have a guaranteed salary. So that is the problem with state ownership. Not just in South Africa, everywhere in the world. But it's not as if it's something that cannot be dealt with. You see? It can. Singapore, for instance, did it. And many other, China, lots of these big institutions in China are state-owned. They are state institutions and government-run. But what you need to have discipline and serious enforcement measures, you know, and there must be accountability. So if we appoint you as CEO of Eskom or CEO of Transnet or SAA, you must do what you sign up to do. You know, it shouldn't be so. What drives you and what keeps you sort of on the line, so to speak, or towing the line, is the fact that if you don't do your work, it's going to have a direct impact on. So we should have a similar system in government where, you know, if you're CEO of a state-owned company, if you don't do your job, there's a serious impact on you. You know. And that's what we don't have in South Africa, and that's why we have the kinds of problems that we have. So it doesn't mean that the solution is privatization. The solution is actually strengthening the institutional framework and the management systems of these institutions. That's what we need to do. That's what what's his name? The first Prime Minister of Singapore, Lee Jong Kim.
Kim, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. He didn't take nonsense.
Yeah.
You see, and that's the one thing, that he was a true leader. He was not a politician, he was a leader. And there's a difference between the two. In South Africa, we have politicians, not leaders.
Correct.
Yeah. You see, the first minister that he fired, so when he took over, it was very clear, you know, in the Singaporean government, we are going to have only competent people. Number two, we want patriotic people to work in government. You work for the Singaporean government and the Singaporean state and the Singaporean people. You don't work for anybody else. So, competent, patriotic, ethical. Zero tolerance to corruption. And if you fitted that, and you had all of those three characteristics, you would do well in the Singaporean government. In South Africa, it's the opposite.
And that's why the standard is so high.
Then that's why the standard is so high. You see, it's that simple. You know, you don't have to privatize anything. Just make sure that you keep those.
No, in South Africa, it's the opposite.
It's the opposite. South Africa is the opposite. That's why this is what's happening. And then Abelungu get an opportunity to say no, privatize because this is going wrong. Privatization is not the solution, especially in a country like South Africa. So to think that, you see, South Africa's economic problems, okay, are structural and institutional, okay.
Yes.
Based on our history.
Yes.
Okay. Now, you can't change that by economic growth. I was listening to John Steenhuisen, I don't know, 2 days or 3 days ago, announcing the DA's plan for economic growth. Nonsense. Boulder dash everything that he was saying there. I don't know whether he thinks we are fools or if he's dumb. Maybe both. I don't know. But economic growth is not going to solve the problems that we have. It's not going to solve the problem of inequality. It's not going to solve the unemployment problem. Nothing. Let me tell you what the problem is with the economy of South Africa. The economy of South Africa is an extractive economy, and we've spoken about this a little bit earlier. You extract the wealth and either ship it out of the country or you concentrate it in a small minority of people. So it's extractive in its structure, which means that the country doesn't benefit because the wealth is extracted and taken away. That's the first problem. As opposed, for instance, to a situation where it's the opposite. For example, take the Arab countries, oil countries, Saudi Arabia and all of this. Their wealth is owned by the state. It's not owned by, there's no foreign company that owns oil wells in Saudi. Recently, they've gotten some private drillers but those private drillers, they drill on contract and they bring the oil to the state company. And so the wealth of the country doesn't get extracted out of the country. It stays with it. Those countries are rich. And they're able to take care of their citizens. There's no reason why South Africa should be this poor. This country is wealthy.
Wealthy beyond.
Yeah. We've got lots of wealth, but it's been extracted out. I can make another example. Take Norway, for instance. You know, when Norway discovered oil, they set up a national oil company. They did not say, oh, it's free for all for the private sector. And it's not a communist country. You know, it's a Scandinavian country just north of Europe with Western
capitalism.
Exactly. But they said, no. It's the wealth of the country, not of private players. And so the state owned all the oil, and they created a sovereign wealth fund where all the profits from the oil revenues were put into the sovereign wealth fund. That sovereign wealth fund, I can't remember the figures now. When I last checked, it's like trillions of euros worth, you know. And just the interest from that is enough to take care of the whole population, take care of the social services and everything.
That's this could be happening here.
This is what, so when the ANC in the Freedom Charter said, we need to nationalize the major industries in the country, that's what they were talking about. And these mohus that came in 1991, they then dumped it because they'd been bought. You see, they'd been bought. That's why I say, when you look at that document, Ready to Govern, it was a major departure from ANC policy. It was a sellout document. So anyway, that's one of the problems with the economy of South Africa. And if you want to change and get rid of the poverty, you need to change that.
Yeah.
The second thing is that the economy is concentrated in a very small group of players, less than 10%. So what happens is that you expect the 10% to have all the ideas, the innovation, the energy, everything for the other 90%. It's not going to happen. It's not going to happen. So what is happening is that the exclusion of black people from meaningful participation in the economy actually starves South Africa of potential growth and wealth.
Yep.
Yeah. There is so much intelligence, so much innovation, so much energy amongst black people that could, catapult this economy onto another level, But it's been excluded. Why? Because if that happens, it will rattle the cage and threaten the dominance of this small minority that wants to have control and economic power and control the politicians and everything. You see, that is the problem. So unless you decentralize and deconcentrate the ownership and control of the economy, it's not going to grow. You see? So when people say, economy, Johnston isn't. Firstly, his plan is that in order to grow the economy, we must privatize. Exactly. I'm like, what nonsense is this? Same old tired story. He comes to South Africans to pretend as if he's tabling something that is good for the economy, when in fact he's tabling something that is good for this 10%. And now we must privatize government. He says we must privatize Eskom, we must privatize the rail systems and the ports and everything. And, and who is private business in South Africa? It's white people. Hey,
it's a lot, eh?
It's a lot.
It's a lot.
I was so angry. I was so angry when I was listening to John Steenhuisen when he was talking. I said, these people, they still take us for fools, eh? They still take us for fools. It's just one last thing on that John Steenhuisen thing. He starts off, Ramaphosa spoke about Tinswalo. So John Steenhuisen was talking about Kabelo. Yeah. So he says, I'm going to start with a true story, which, happened or happens in the East Rand. It's a Kabelo. Kabelo is an entrepreneur, black entrepreneur, And Kabelo, I think he runs a trucking business or a transportation business, something like that. But, Kabelo tries to go to government, to get business. He doesn't. He is sidelined and excluded by the tenderpreneurs who are corrupt and close to the politicians. And he tries to go to the bank. He doesn't get financed because he doesn't have collateral, to put up against the money that he wants to raise for his business. And so Kabelo, loses heart and his business, eventually dies. Now, the sad thing is that this is a true story of many black South Africans. Okay. But instead of John Steenhuisen saying, okay, we need to reform the banking sector, he doesn't say that. He says, therefore, we need to privatize ports. What nonsense is that? How do you go from this story to privatization? He reminds me of this dumb researcher. Researcher was not very intelligent. So he was studying this is on the lighter side of things. He was studying the nervous system of amphibians, So he's got a frog on the table, and he's in the lab and everything. And so a frog is an amphibian, right? So he shouts at the frog, jump, and the frog jumps. And then he makes notes in his notebook. He's a researcher, scientist with, white coat and everything. And then he cuts the one hind leg of the poor frog, and the poor frog is bleeding, and he says, jump, and the frog, sort of barely, it's jumping because the sound, when he says jump, it frightens the frog. So, and the frog, then he makes some notes on the side and all that. And then he cuts the other leg. And then he says, jump! the frog doesn't jump, you know. It says jump, the frog doesn't jump. Then he says that it is clear, this is his conclusion of the experiment now, it is clear that when you cut off the hind legs of an amphibian, the amphibian loses its sense of hearing.
Oh, wow. So John reminds you of that.
John Steenhuisen reminds me of this. You know, how do you come from the Kabelo story to the conclusion that the solution to this is privatization of the ports?
So let's wrap up our conversation now.
Are we? Is it?
It's been a while, trust me. Right. Close to 2 hours.
It feels like nothing.
But I do have one last question though, because we've just come out of this Gayton experience as we talk about what is leadership and who should be in the difference between leaders and politicians.
Yeah.
So now when we look at our options, right, when we look at the heads, we've got Cyril Ramaphosa, we've got Gayton McKenzie, we've got Julius Malema, we've got Floyd Chivambo, we've got, who's this guy from Bosa? Oh yeah, even Musima Imane. So let's look at these type of leaders we've got. And just tell me, let's unpack a bit about the caliber of leadership, because that's apparently our top selection.
Yeah. And apparently, Fikile Mbalula also wants to run for president.
You see, so
yeah. Look, I think that the caliber of leadership that we have in political leadership in South Africa that we have is not that great. Yeah. And I say it's not that great, and I don't want to personalize, so I'm just going to talk in general, and those individuals...
whoever Cinderella is will put on their shoe.
Yes, exactly. So, firstly, when you are a leader, you do bold things. Bold. It's not, you're not tweaking things, especially in a society that requires transformative change. Okay? So it's not about, that act, we need to change clause, whatever in that act. No, South Africa doesn't need that. And it takes you 2 years to change a small little clause somewhere. You go and shout in parliament for 2 years, and then, no. So, it's politicians who do that. Perhaps in an economy that is okay, if you know what I mean, and the day-to-day life is about just tweaking here and there. In South Africa, that's not where we are. Okay, so we need a transformative change. For transformative change, you need bold leadership. Okay, and none of those people offer that. Some people might argue that maybe Julius Malema could do it, maybe. But then the question still remains, whether he will have everything else that is required. Proper political leaders offer a vision. None of those people have offered any vision for our country. Okay. I've said this before. I said it in one TV interview, and they almost cut me off. And even yesterday I was saying something in one of the radio stations. They literally cut me because they didn't like what I was saying. South Africa does not have a vision. So if you're a leader, one of the things, you have to have a vision and you have to infuse it in people. so that people know where we're going. Where are we going as South Africans? Or as a country, South Africa?
Nowhere.
What are we about? There's nothing. It's so sad, man. It's so sad. So then proper leaders, great leaders, they speak the truth. They tell the truth as it is. They don't, try to, and they don't gaslight people. They don't, which is what the ANC is about these days. They lie and they gaslight and
lack of accountability.
And all
Not
that.
just ANC, bonke,
Yeah. So, which is what holds the country back. Remember, we were talking about Singapore and
Oh, I forgot MK.
Yeah.
Because Zuma's there also.
Yeah. So where's the vision for our country? It's not there. I have ideas about that, but there's a subject for another day. What we need to do in this country, we need to say, look, and I often make examples with South Korea. We can make examples about many other countries. But I like South Korea because more or less similar size, country, population-wise, and all of that, Do you know that South Korea in the 1960s was at the same level of development as Africa? Same as China. And in fact, in many cases, it was even lower than some of its level of development was lower than that of South Africa, actually. The level of development was similar to Burkina Faso and all of it. And then, when the new government came in, you remember they fought the war. The Koreans used to be colonized by the Japanese. Yeah, they fought. Then there was the Korean War. But when in South Korea, the new government, after all of those wars and battles were fought, when they eventually got their independence, do you know what they said? And they had a very patriotic president. They said, our forefathers fought and died for us to inherit this country. It is now, and they sacrificed their lives in order for us to inherit this country. It is now our turn to sacrifice so that future generations can inherit a prosperous country. They said it's our turn to sacrifice. Their salaries were very little. They worked almost for nothing and worked long hours. That's how patriotic they are. It is our time to sacrifice so that we can pass on a prosperous country to future generations. What did we say? It's our turn to eat. That's what all of these leaders say.
Yep.
It's our turn to. You see the difference in mindset.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what the leaders think in that way. What is it that we should do? What value should we add so that, it's not about, it's my turn to eat. And then what they then did is they crafted a vision for the country. They said, okay, Singapore is going to be prosperous. And they clearly defined what they mean by that. They said they will have a 100% literacy rate. When they took over, the literacy rate was below 20%. It was around 15 or 17%. In other words, more than 80% of the population couldn't read and write. They said, by this time, we will achieve 100% literacy. And by that, they meant not just that you get 100% of the population must have an equivalent of a matric. And then they set themselves a target that 50% of the population must have at least a first degree. Then they moved on. So the resources that were channeled towards good education were enormous. And it's not just about educating people. They know that it's only through, especially if you look at how technology progresses and all of that, you can't assemble cell phones when you don't have educated people who understand electronics and computer science and how to make microchips and all of these things. You can't. So you got to have the educational base to be able to do that, which then leads to you being able to make cell phones and all of those things. That's the role of education. It's not we don't just educate people just so kids can go to school. Then what they did is they then said, okay, we are going to select 5 industries that we will excel in as a country. Okay? In those industries, we must either be number 1, number 2, or we shouldn't be in them if we're not leading. Globally. Not just in Korea or in Asia. Globally, we must be either be number 1 or number 2 in those industries. Aggressive targets. And they selected electronics, telecommunications, shipbuilding, automotive sector, and banking. Out of those, they succeeded in 4 of them. It's banking that they haven't really succeeded. That's why. Tina, when we grew up, there was no LG. There was no Hyundai. There was no... It was none of these products. There was no Samsung. But it starts with a proper vision and a proper plan and a ruthless execution of that plan. Anyone who gets corrupt, they get imprisoned. No 2 ways about it. And we put you in office. We say you must build houses. 5 years later, there are no houses. But you've been earning a salary all of this time. No, there must be punishment for such things. Instead of working, you go to certain hotels, you sit with slay queens and drink expensive whiskeys. You just can't have those kinds of practices if you want to build a country.
Oh, we took the club owners, we put them in parliament.
Yeah. It's ridiculous.
Completely.
Yeah. You see, so where are our 3 or 4 or 5 industries that we want to excel in? Nothing. Where is the discipline that is required in order to be able to do those things? It's not there. So that's what leadership is about. That's what leadership should tackle. And those people who do have ideas about these things get sidelined because it's not in the interests of the power holders at the moment, especially the whites. You see?
The whites want more Cyril.
Yeah.
They want more Gator.
Exactly. Bafuna labo bantu labo. Leaders, not leaders, politicians who are clueless, visionless, and compromised.
They create leaders. I mean, so we don't know him as a political voice or any kind of voice, actually. Now he's a leader of a political party in parliament. And it's like...
How?
Yeah,
they get created. Ramaphosa is their creation.
Yes.
Gayton
is also their creation.
And now they are trying to create and impose Motsepe on us. You see, that's what they do.
Because they've got the money and the capital. So they can just put a whole lot of budget onto one black to make them a special black.
Exactly, and sell him. Then you start hearing something about News 24. News 24 writes a story, some journalist. Wouldn't Patrice Motsepe be a good president for this country? And then they perpetuate the narrative. Before you know it, it's almost a reality. We should resist this. Our leaders have been chosen for us.
Yeah. And they choose the weakest amongst us.
Yeah, you see. And now, when they get to be president, they do the same. I mean, you know, I often just say, I don't know why we accept this nonsense, man. We're not angry enough. You know, when Ramaphosa, and we are born, there is no seriousness in this whole thing.
Yes.
It's a game that's just been played.
Yes.
When Ramaphosa appoints Umama Enji Motshekga as Minister of Defense, what exactly is he trying to tell us? You see the lack of seriousness in this whole thing.
A whole defense
of
a country.
Of a country. It's just ridiculous what's going on. You know? And the best people that we have in our society are left out.
Yes.
Yeah, they're left out. But precisely because South Africa must stay in this mediocre. And you know what pains me more than anything else? It's that South Africa actually has the potential to be in the top 10 countries in the world.
Yep.
You know,
easily.
I've traveled. I've been fortunate and blessed to have the opportunity to travel. I've been to 31 countries around the world, including our continent. Let me tell you, everywhere I go, I say, you know. But
this is it.
Yeah, you know, but with all of this potential, the ANC is stuffing things up. You know?
Well, it's convenient. It's convenient for the people with the capital to choose the weakest amongst us and show how bad black government is so that they can privatize.
Yeah, exactly. And, you know.
It works for them.
Yeah. No, it does. And if you're not willing to play that game, you just get excluded, sidelined. And I mean, you know, I watch what happens at ESCOM. It's such a sad story, you know. But anyway.
Phew.
Yeah, so we don't have the best leaders. If we have to choose leaders going forward, they have to come outside of the current crop. Yeah. They have to come. I mean, I just can't imagine people who even, you know, entertain the idea of Fikile Mbalula. I mean, what? I mean, it's just ridiculous, man.
Us on the ground have got more integrity and principles than our leaders.
Yeah.
What is that?
What is that? When in fact we should be learning from them and follow.
I don't aspire to be any of them.
Yeah. So this is the problem. And I think South Africans need to, firstly, I think we need to get angry. I have a serious problem with, part of the problem is us. I don't know if it's because of what was done to us.
Yeah, it is.
You know,
we're traumatized.
We're traumatized, eh? I don't know, but you know,
beaten to submission.
Yeah, we're not angry enough. We are simply not angry enough, Nziki. I mean, imagine the life of a black person in South Africa. It's just not the average black person. A black child gets born in a shack, you know, and then they struggle all their lives, working hard every day, trying to put food on the table, and then you die. Is that a life?
That's why the suicide rates are so high.
Sorry?
That's why
also
the suicide rates are so
yeah.
high.
Is that a
That's not.
It's not a life. It's not
fair.
It's not fair. It's simply not right. And we should not be accepting it. And the fact that our politicians are perpetuating this situation is just horrible. No, we have to change that situation. On the other hand, a white child gets born into a nice,
paradise,
cozy environment. You know, they even have babysitters, and there's nothing.
Their jobs are set up for them. They don't even have to work hard. They get the big platforms.
They go and get a good education. They come out of there. They are going to corporate or family business. When the parents die, they inherit everything: the land, the farms, the businesses. You know, they travel the world. They take holidays. Look at those two lives. Why must black people live this life? In our own country. You know, you're a spiritual person. I think we you know, get together with other spiritual, unless, you know, it's like our spirits are dead as black people. It's like we're dead inside. You know, we need to rekindle the spirit of the black man.
Okay.
You know, we need to remind our people of who they are. It's like we've forgotten who we are.
That's exactly it.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Luthuli. Thank you. That's exactly it. Kamaku, thank you for taking the time to come hang out with us on MOYA.
Yeah.
It's been such a privilege. I'm sure this is not the last time. We'll call you again when things get a little bit juicy again. Yes.
Hopefully by that time we will have toppled Ramaphosa. I'm working so hard.
I can see you.
I'm working so hard.
Umoya ulight, Umoya ubright, guys. Thank you for joining us. Once again, thank you for liking, sharing, and subscribing. We thank you for watching the adverts to the end. I told you about those DA adverts, guys. Not my doing. You know Abilung Banjan. Skip that ad. Watch the other ones. See you again next time.
Who are you when all you were has been diluted by lies and white lines cancelling out all that which has been written of your history? Why do you look at yourself as a mystery? Doesn't the sun shine because you open your eyes? Doesn't the moon stay situated within the same stars your DNA sparkles off? Your spirit knows that surely corner into it off. Buza umoya so you may return to being well off. Because spiritually you are rich, yet your ancestors cry because you are out of reach. But yours is to command all elements while God takes inspiration from the very mirror she looked at to become. Remember who you are and never finish just when they think that with you they are done.